Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Julie Skur, and I am the president of the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce. As well, I am the director of finance and operations at Queen Margaret School. Thank you for coming out to the Provincial All Candidates Forum. We gathered here in 2015 for the federal election. At that time, 68% of Canada's eligible voters participated in the election. But here in the Cowichan, 72% of eligible voters cast their election votes. That election sent Alistair McGregor to Ottawa to represent Cowichan. Alistair was... You're getting ahead of me. Alistair was on this stage for the Chamber's Federal All Candidates Forum, and he is here this evening. So Alistair, would you like to stand, please? And thank you for joining us this evening. Cowichan is and always has been a caring, engaged community. So it's a true privilege for the Chamber to organize and host this public event. We encourage everyone to get to know their local candidates, the platforms, and the issues that are important both to you and your neighbors. And of course, be sure to vote on May the 9th. Tonight, we welcome the support of our presenting sponsor, Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, whom we will hear from shortly. We are grateful for support from the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, and this includes some volunteers whom I'd like to acknowledge. Please wave when I say your name, please. Don McClintock, Lavina Miller, George Nielsen, Daryl Payson, and our timekeepers, Cliff and Barb Moberg. And be sure to check their election info website at novotenovoice.ca. As well, the District Students Advisory Council has sent some volunteers this evening as well. Just stand and wave so we know where you are. Marin McCarthy from Francis Kelsey, Alex Portick from Cowichan Secondary, Michelle Gattari from Cowichan Secondary, Pierce Jones from Francis Kelsey, and Darlene Gattari from Cowichan Secondary. You'll be hearing more from the students a little later. My thanks to all the volunteers and to the Chamber directors for supporting this forum this evening. Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, is a longtime supporter of the Chamber and many other organizations throughout the Cowichan. We see their presence at fundraisers and events everywhere. As well, their full cupboard program helps keep the shelves stocked at food banks all over Vancouver Island. They truly believe in making a difference in the communities they serve. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of Island Savings, Randy Birch.
Thank you, Julie, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Cowichan Valley's Regional All Candidates Forum. A strong community depends on having an active and informed population, and that is why Island Savings is very proud to sponsor this event tonight. The Cowichan region is poised for great things in the immediate future. However, the region will need strong political leadership to execute on its potential. Tonight's forum is about hearing the policies and plans each candidate and party bring to the Cowichan Valley. At Island Savings, we're excited to be helping facilitate active discussion of topics which are important to our communities. Good luck to each of the candidates, and of course, as Julie mentioned, please make sure you vote. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you for Island Savings Credit Union being a part of our community. Wade Simmons of Amber Education is our moderator this evening. With Wade at the helm, you will find the evening moves along, time limits are enforced, and the procedures are clear. All this helps ensure that the candidates answer as many of your questions as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome moderator Wade Sims.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. Let's get started right away. First up is just to review a few rules and requests, if you don't mind. First off, if you have cell phones, if I can ask you to turn those to silent or turn them off, would be super. And for your information, we have both opening and closing remarks and, of course, questions to the candidates. So the opening remarks will be 3 minutes long, closing 2 minutes, opportunity to answer a question 1 minute, and then there is another chance for a rebuttal if a candidate is included in an answer. It'll be 30 seconds for that rebuttal. So just so you have a sense of how the evening is going to go. We have several sources of questions. There are some prepared questions, which have been provided to me. There are runners, which will be in the audience, and we just ask that you put your hand up. If you filled out a form or a question and you want that to be passed forward, then please put up your hand and the runners will find you and they will bring those towards the stage. All right. There are microphones left and right are labeled 1 and 2. And if you would like to ask a question of the candidate, please feel free to line up. We're going to be a few minutes before we get to that part, so there isn't a huge rush to get there right now. But if you would like to, there will be the microphones in each aisle. I'll ask you with the questions to please think about 15 seconds in length for that question. Keep it as succinct as you can. It is a question rather than a lot of preamble, and it is not a multi-part question or 2 or 3 questions wrapped into one. So please keep those as direct as you can. And you'll have a choice between having all the candidates answer a question, which you would earmark, or to identify a single candidate or more that you would like to hear from on your question. The other opportunity for questions is that we have students with us tonight, as Julie mentioned, and so they are going to come forward to the podium and they're going to ask their questions of the candidates as their opportunity arises throughout. Seems a little unnecessary to say, but please be aware that we are being recorded by Shaw Cable, and this recording, except for that part, is going to be rebroadcast several times starting May the 3rd at 6 o'clock, if you're looking for that. All right. Just quickly, I'll ask, are there any questions on format from the candidates? Any questions from the audience on format? I can't. All right. Super. You'll find me fairly tight to those times, so you watch for me to step in. We have timers, as was mentioned, at the bottom row here, so there'll be a yellow card for a warning and a red card for a full stop, and I will jump in if a candidate is exceeding their time limit. We have randomly selected the order for the opening and closing remarks, so we'll get underway. The opening remarks this evening start with Mr. Steve Hauser of the BC Liberal Party.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether number 1 is absolutely the stars aligning, or is it fate, or what is it to actually get the chance to go first. I hope that I can make a good impression. That's what we're all here to do tonight. We're seeking your votes. It's terrific that you are all here. This is really an engaging part of the democratic process. Some of you are going to be thinking along party lines. Some of you will be thinking along the lines of the person. Others may be thinking about promises and what is he or she going to promise tonight. I have very few promises. The one that I have been using a lot is hospital, hospice, high school, and then I threw in Hauser to make sure that we got those 3 things. But canvassing on the doors, listening to people, another H has come up, and I think it will come up tonight. It's housing, affordable housing, because that really is an issue that affects so many people, and it is something I think we're all going to have to work really hard on to address. And one of the messages that I have tonight is, how can we best deal with all the multiple requirements that people have so that they feel looked after and safe, and that we have the care that we need, whether it's for seniors, for medical services, highways, transportation. The fundamental root of it all, I believe, and I think you will have heard it as one of the Liberal platform messages, is a strong economy, because it's very difficult to provide the services that you all want and need and expect if people aren't working, if they can't feed their families, and get out and be a contributing part of their community. So underpinning it all, and it's not the government doing it. The government, we shouldn't have government doing everything. We should have government providing the climate that makes people want to invest, that they don't feel that they're blocked, that they're taxed too much. Let people get out and work and create jobs. And we have such a marvelous place here in the Cowichan Valley. We have opportunities for tourism. It is just a beautiful place. People are coming here. That's one of the pressures on housing that we're going to have to be really creative about. But I'm optimistic by nature, and I think it is an attitude that, yes, we have problems, but we also are innovative, and I hope intelligent, thoughtful, and creative, and we can deal with some of our problems. We'll hear a lot tonight about the environment. Many of us cherish the environment. My last job was with the Nature Trust of British Columbia.
And thank you very much.
And thank you all very much. See you later.
In second spot, Ms. Eden Haythornthwaite, Independent.
Good evening. My name is Eden Haythornthwaite, and I'm running as an independent socialist to be your MLA. True story. I've got a true story. In 1945, the men and women coming back from Europe to Britain after the war decided that they would not return to the same life that the 20s and 30s had served up. Hierarchy, privilege for a few, squalor, and want. They had fought too hard and lost too much to go back to the good old days. The Labour government issued a manifesto for the election that year and won in a landslide. According to the program they proposed, they nationalized the mines, the railways, critical industries, banks. They established a program of full employment. They carried out full-scale social housing construction for the population and unveiled the National Health Service, which allowed the people of the UK to have free health care, the first of its kind in the world. All this was accomplished by the Attlee government and the British people within 5 years of the end of a war that devastated their country, sank them into debt, and killed thousands of their people. They did all this by stepping up together and bringing the solidarity they had exercised to win the war, to win a better peace. My point? If you don't think that my program, and I hope you've seen it, is a good idea, well, that's one thing. But if you support this, but figure we can't do it, think again. If the people of Britain, in that time of unimaginable hardship, could ask the questions, who owns the wealth of this country? Who does the work? Who has the right to decide what this place will look like? We can do that too, and come up with something truly magnificent. We can meet the challenges of wealth inequality and climate change through the same solidarity and genuine democracy. Programs like the one I have here are for us to build together year in and year out, not just as a talking point for a 30-day election cycle. Everything on this piece of card is urgent and achievable. It's a matter of political will. If the worst of us can impose their political will to accumulate and to hoard, then the best of us can change this. We can defend our planet, we can defend our nation and our communities. This cannot wait. As I grow older, I have realized that patience is not always a virtue.
Mr. Samuel Lockhart, Independent.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First off, I just wanted to say how honored I am to be up here in front of you, and I wanted all of you guys to give yourself a round of applause for attending. It's people like you who make our jobs here worth doing something, and also without your guys' vote and support by coming here, we wouldn't have anything to be doing. So please give yourself a round of applause. I'm 24 years old. You might notice that I'm a bit younger than everybody else here on the table. But I don't think that's something that should be held against me. I think I bring a lot of great ideas here and also something new. I think the old way of doing things has stopped working. Frankly, I think everybody's just become smarter. We're becoming more individuals, and we also know a lot more about what's going around us. Based on this, I think that we need new programs and new ideas to bring us into the future. Some of the biggest things that I've learned, coming from Switzerland where I was born, I came here when I was about 2, sorry for that little refresher there. However, in Switzerland, politics are different. The government's job is to bring important subjects to the table and allow the people to vote on it. Instead of here where we elect one official to have our say, the Swiss government allows everybody else to have their say and vote on every single matter. I think ideas like this could be very beneficial to our political system. Some of the 4 important systems that I think need development here in the province are healthcare, affordable housing, job creation, and revamping more of our medical systems. I look forward to having all of your questions tonight, and I'll stick around later on to answer more individually. Thank you.
Mr. Ian Morrison, Independent.
Thank you. I want to begin by first acknowledging that this meeting is taking place on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish and Cowichan peoples. And I'm going to do this a little differently because you noticed when Wade had introduced us that we have a 3-minute opening and a 2-minute closing. So what I'd like to do is first thank Wade and Julie and Elizabeth from the Duncan Chamber for all of their fantastic work in putting this together, and ask you to join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you. I also want to thank the DSAC students that are here, and I also want to mention my daughter is a representative from Lake Cowichan School, but obviously she's working at Dad's table tonight, so she isn't helping out with the students down front here. So I also want to point out as well that National Volunteer Week is upon us, and volunteering is such an important part of our community, and I also want to thank all of you that volunteer in whatever capacity you volunteer in. Our community wouldn't be what our community is without volunteers. So thank you, and I tip my hat to all of you that volunteer as well. So I'm going to just quickly go into something a little different. I'd like to ask each and every one of you to look at this and to assess us with an open mind. I think today you have 7 able candidates in front of you, and I hope you're here to choose the best candidate for the Cowichan Valley. We have parties, we have independents here, and the party candidates are here, and part of what they have to do is sell you their party platform. And I don't believe that party platforms are something that is really that important to an election. I look at party platforms as just an election list of future broken promises. So having said that, I'm looking at this a little differently. I'd like you to tell me what you want your new independent MLA to go to Victoria and work on your behalf. I know that this is our 4th, we've been to Cobble Hill, where people were concerned about seniors housing and a senior center. In Arbutus Ridge, LNG, and guess what? Surgery wait lists. And in Shawnigan Lake, of course, SIA and municipal incorporation. These are important issues that were brought to us by the community, and that's very important. So with that, I can't wait to get to your questions. Put Cowichan Valley first, vote Ian Morrison. Thank you.
Ms. Lori Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you.
And I apologize, BC NDP.
I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the Coast Salish territory. The Coast Salish people are the original environmentalists living and working on this land in a sustainable manner for thousands of years. Thank you to the sponsors and the students that volunteered for this event. I have lived here most of my life, raising 4 children here in the valley with my husband of 42 years. I'm a proud Nona of 7 grandchildren. My husband supported our family on a forestry income, which has given me the opportunity to serve our community for 30 years.
I have a track record of working to make this community a better place. I have dedicated my life to assisting the most vulnerable in our community to meet the challenges they are presented with on a day-to-day basis. For 20 years, I've been coordinating Cowichan Community Kitchens, a program that empowers people on low income to grow their own food, cook, shop, and make meals together. Living in an agricultural community and working on access to food has underlined the importance of our Grow BC, Buy BC, and Feed BC platform. I also have an environmental record in the Cowichan Bay with our award-winning official community plan, eelgrass protection areas, derelict vessels, and working to protect all waterways, including the Cowichan, the Coxsila, and Shawnigan. I understand the tough decisions we need to make to protect our environment. That is why I'm proud to support our platform, which focuses on creating good, sustainable jobs while simultaneously protecting our environment. Listening to all the stories around many kitchen tables led me to look at local government, and I have proudly served 3 terms as the CVRD Director for Area D. My 8 years in local government has given me the experience, the knowledge, and the tools to excel at the provincial level. I'm asking you for the opportunity to use these skills to serve the Cowichan Valley as your MLA and be able to better address issues that I've heard so much about: affordable childcare, skyrocketing BC hydro costs, inadequate health care, underfunded education system, lack of housing, mortgage-sized student debt, and sustainable forestry. I am the candidate with the heart of a citizen and the experience of a leader. Vote for me and the NDP to elect a government that works for you, not against you.
Mr. James Anderson, BC Libertarian Party.
Hi everybody, my name is James Anderson and I'm here representing the Libertarian Party. I'm a Red Seal plumber here in the Valley, and every morning I head out into the community helping people with their plumbing issues. And at the end of the week, I finish up the chores around the house, head out and do a little fishing, or take the dogs for a hike. I'm at that age where I'm starting to have children. My parents are closing in on retirement, and my grandparents are coming to the end of their lives. Creating life and losing loved ones has made me really think about the current state of our country and what it's going to be like for future generations. We all worry about our families and our communities, and we try to do the best we can to support them. There's often too much to do in the time we have each day, and so we've started to try and give some of that load to the government, help make our lives easier and keep us safe, rather than taking responsibility for our own lives and looking out for one another. And the worst part is that we're starting to create a generation of people who turn to the government to solve all of their problems, unlike past generations who came together as a community and worked together voluntarily. I'm here because I don't feel my values are being properly represented in the government. Values like free speech, honesty, personal and property rights, and personal responsibility. I'm concerned that government policies are creating a divide between Canadians and causing us to rely less and less on our communities and more on faceless government officials in an office building somewhere. The size of government has expanded beyond what is productive, and the current rules and regulations have become intrusive and counterproductive. And the ever-increasing growth of government inevitably raises our taxes. I don't feel comfortable supporting a government that seems to have no problem putting future Canadians into debt before they're even born. I'm here because I want to help create a government that empowers individuals and communities instead of pretending to be able to solve everyone's problems. So one of the most frustrating things about being a libertarian, it isn't that people don't necessarily like what we believe, it's that they don't know or correctly understand what libertarians are all about. So unlike liberals or conservatives, libertarians support a high degree of both personal and economic freedoms. So we're in favor of lowering and eliminating taxes, slashing bureaucratic regulations of businesses, encouraging responsible spending with the tax money when it is necessary, and prefer charitable donations over government welfare. Libertarians also reject the use of force to control people's personal and economic behaviors. I think that together we can limit the government's control and put choice and responsibility back in the hands of British Columbians where it belongs. Thank you.
Ms. Sonia Firstenow, Greens of British Columbia.
Thank you. 4 years ago, I lost my faith in our provincial government when the Ministry of Environment granted a permit to allow 5 million tons of contaminated soil to be dumped in our Shawnigan watershed. But not for 1 second did I lose my faith in my small but mighty community, and not for 1 second did I lose my conviction that we would be successful in seeing the permit revoked. I knew that our success was guaranteed as long as we rooted our efforts in integrity, honesty, and respect. And that's what we did, and we're a stronger community for it. Over the past 4 years, over the course of our fight, I peeked behind the curtain to see how government really works in BC, and I learned that the system is profoundly broken. It's not serving people, and it's not protecting communities. I learned that this government puts vested interests ahead of the well-being of people and communities. 2 quarry operators and the convenience for developers outweighed the well-being, the health, and the future of our entire community. I learned that our hyper-adversarial, hyper-partisan two-party system, where each side spends too much time scoring points and not enough time cooperating and collaborating, doesn't serve the people of this province. But most importantly, I learned that there is nothing more powerful than a community that works together. I learned to embrace hope, optimism, compassion, and kindness, and we learned as a community that these are far more powerful than anger, hatred, or fear. That's what makes me so excited to run for the BC Greens. The vision that the Greens have for this province of BC is a vision of hope and optimism. It's a vision that starts with the premise that everyone in our province can enjoy economic security, that our resources can be managed sustainably, and that fairness can be the fundamental value of government. The Green Platform offers solutions: basic income for youth aging out of foster care, free childcare, and free early childhood education, an overhaul of our tax system that takes the burden off of families and reverses the trend towards regressive taxation, a climate action plan that puts BC back into a leadership position, and an economic plan that positions BC to thrive in the 21st century economy. I ask you to join me in feeling hopeful and optimistic about the future of Cowichan Valley and all of BC, because together we can change everything.
Thank you very much to all the candidates for that. Now let's move into the question portions as we carry on from here. I'm going to start with one of the prepared questions, but now or very soon would be a time to start heading to the microphones if you would like to be presenting your own question, and or be sure to get your hands up if you have questions that you have written down and you want those run to the stage here. And again, we have the student runners who will give you a hand with those as need be. All right, so we're going to go in the order of the table with this first prepared question. As a way of warning, Mr. Anderson, you are going to be first, and we're going to work our way down the table in this first question. We will be changing the sequence, however, as we progress to each next question. So this question comes from the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce. What is your position regarding replacing the PST with a value-added tax to help streamline and simplify taxation for business owners? What is your position regarding replacing the PST with a value-added tax to help streamline and simplify taxation for business owners? Mr. Anderson, BC Libertarian Party.
So I think that we definitely need to, oh, there we go. I think we definitely do need to streamline the tax code. Even tax lawyers and accountants, can barely understand the full scope of the tax code. And I also think we need to start reducing the amount of taxes that businesses are paying. Businesses are providing jobs for people in the community, And raising taxes on businesses and making the taxes more difficult for them is only inhibiting them from hiring more employees.
Thank you very much. Ms. Firstenow.
Thank you. So, small businesses account for 98% of businesses in BC. They are the backbone and the engine of our economy, and they are the backbones and the engines of our communities as well. We know that small businesses provide jobs and training for our youth. They keep our youth here. So we have to support small businesses. The BC Greens economic plan really is geared towards supporting small business, innovation, and community building efforts. So what is in our plan is the commitment to work with small businesses to ensure that the taxation would actually benefit the small businesses in our communities. And so we don't have an official position on that, but our official position is really to work with small business.
Thank you. Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
In my program, it calls for removing all consumption taxes. The belief is that these are all regressive because they fall on all our heads the same way regardless of what our incomes are. Whether it's a small business or anybody else, as far as I can tell, the best way we can do this is overhaul our tax code, make sure the rich pay their share, and I suppose that will help everybody. But right now our tax code is a disgrace. It needs to be not just simplified, it needs to be weighted more heavily in favor of working people.
The BC Liberal government has just proposed a reduction in the provincial sales tax on business, and they have also committed to freezing income taxes for 4 years. So the plan is for people to pay manageable taxes, to have an economy that still supports and produces the jobs so that people can work and feed their families.
Ms. Yanni DiNardo.
Yes, the BC NDP also realized that small business is also the backbone to the local economy, and it is so important. And we will also be doing a tax reduction for the small business and know that it is very important. And it's very important that we have small businesses and all businesses prospering in the Valley. And so far it has been just Christy Clark's rich friends that have continued to prosper, and we'd like all levels of income to be able to prosper. Thank you.
Mr. Lockhart.
Well, that's an excellent question. I myself am a business owner, so I'm not just going to speculate on how hard it is for businesses. I know for a fact it's very difficult to have a business here in Canada, and taxes definitely don't make it easier. I don't have an answer on what is the appropriate measures to be taking, but I will always be in favor of doing anything to make our jobs easier for the Canadian way of life. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. I think I heard the question was what would I do around replacing the PST and with a value-added tax and streamlining the burden for business owners. That's a very important question because the business owners that I talk to that adhere to the regulations and the reporting requirements say that it's a huge burden to not only the PST but all of the employee regulations that have to be done as well. So we have to figure out a new way of doing a tax, replacing the PST. Now, GST was obviously hated, brought in without consultation, and repealed. So I think the way forward is a consultation with our business community, with the small business owners, and the public. Because obviously something was wrong if you had a recall and a repeal initiative that was successful in replacing the GST.
And thank you very much. All right, let's turn to the microphones, perhaps to microphone number 1. And as get used to the order, Ms. Firstenow, this will be coming to you, assuming that it's for all candidates. But microphone number 1, sir, I'll ask you to state your name and whether or not you are directly working with any of the parties during this actual election.
My name is Aaron Podolsky, and I'm a resident of Mill Bay. And I have a question just for one candidate.
Fine.
For Ian Morrison. It's a bit of a personal question. I hope he doesn't mind. But part of the process of us being here is to learn more about the...
Yeah, please go ahead with your question.
I understand that you were president of the NDP Riding Association and wanted to be nominated as a candidate for that party in this election. Why did you withdraw from that process and from that party? and decide to run as an independent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. It was very simple. About a year and a half ago, in the run-up to the nomination process, I was assured by the party president that if I sold memberships and worked hard and signed up members, that I'd be good to go in the fall for the nomination process. And last summer, that became apparent that the party in the mainland was going to override the local constituency association that said no to the equity mandate in the Cowichan Valley. And I worked as long as I could until the deadline passed and it was clear that I wouldn't be allowed in the race. And so over Christmas, my family and I had the discussion about what was the path forward, and resignation as the president of the constituency association, and then to declare running as an independent. That was the next step. I have a burning desire to serve my community, and that's why I'm sitting up here today in service of you.
And thank you very much. I just want to make sure that I get this correct. So the party that you're referring to was?
New Democratic Party.
Right. So in opportunity for rebuttal, would the New Democratic Party like this opportunity? 30 seconds if you would.
Certainly. The equity mandate was by provincial council in 2011. So I'm not sure why, and also Jean Crowder and Jan Pollinger, we've had all kinds of women that have been in this riding, and it was about equity, and it was brought through at provincial council. So I don't believe that I would become a president of a party that, if I didn't believe in what they stood for, I would not have stayed that long, and when was during our nomination. So it was very challenging and
thank you very much.
Difficult.
All right, let's head over to microphone number 2.
Hi, my name is Matt. I'm from Lake Cowichan. I will state that I am supporting Ian. So I come from a younger generation that upholds equality as an essential pillar in society, and discrimination in any form, in my mind, is unacceptable, whether that be based on gender, skin color, or sexual orientation.
I need a question.
So my question for Lori is, do you support the equity mandate and the discrimination that goes along with it? And for everyone else, what is your opinion on quotas for elected offices?
Sorry, that's okay. So we got
it's
question and a half. All right.
One for
enough.
Lori and one for the rest.
Got it. All right, we're going to tackle this in order, though. So, Ms. Furstenau, we're going to start with you.
Thank you. I think we do need to see more women and more diversity in politics. But I think that the way we do that is to make politics more appealing. I have to say, my own experience as a CVRD director in my community has been overwhelmingly positive. When I entered the fray into provincial politics, it gets a little nastier. And I think that if we can cultivate a far more respectful and kind arena for politics, we will attract more people. But right now, the challenge is that for a lot of people, it's a very uncomfortable and maybe uninviting arena to go into. So if we can start with kindness, we'll probably get far more diversity.
Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
I think it's important to always have the best candidate. I'm not always certain that gender is the issue. I don't think Maggie Thatcher did much for the people of Britain, or the women of Britain in particular, frankly. I do support, I think I'm the oldest sitting up here, so I'm very familiar with the kinds of barriers that women face in politics and everywhere. So it seems to me that if we get down to the business of actually removing these barriers everywhere in a very natural and organic way, women will come forward to take part in politics. And actually, in my experience, they already do.
Mr. Hauser.
How another party governs its nominating process, I think, is entirely up to them. It just strikes me as odd, though, to enfranchise one group or gender or status of person at the same time as disenfranchising another group. But that's how the NDP chose to do it. They can reap the rewards or the damages from that. The BC Liberals have an open policy. We encourage the best candidates to come forward with no gerrymandering or quotas. We ended up by having 7 women and 7 male candidates running on the Vancouver Island team.
And Ms. Yanni Donardo, and again, we've had a bit of your involvement of the party name in the answer to the question, so you've got 1:30 to answer this now.
Thank you. Well, what I would like to say is that it's also a sign of a very progressive party, because there are people, you would like to be able to represent the people in your population. So that's not just, it's an equity mandate, not an equality mandate. So there is the gay, lesbian, bi, and transsexual. There is all kinds that we need to represent. Sitting around a board table, what I find most valuable is that when we have diverse groups of people that sit together and are able to speak and represent all members of our community. So that is just what I think, that this has been going on, like I had said, that this is since 2011. I think to 2007 the party has been talking about it. And I just believe that this is very progressive, and I don't even know why this should even be an issue in 2017, and why it should come up, why this issue should come up just before a nomination, and it was very interesting, and that's the sad part about fairness.
Mr. Lockhart.
I think the answer is pretty simple. At the end, we just need to look at the end game. The end game is making sure that everybody's taken care of and that our people that we elect are doing the jobs that they're appointed to. In the end, I think if the women are the best for the job, then so be it. Let them run. If not, then let the best win. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. I looked up the word discrimination in the dictionary, and it says the promotion or improvement of one group to the disadvantage or restriction of another. So what this comes down to is longtime New Democrats coming to me and saying, I can't believe my party would do something like this. We want the best candidate put forward. There's other ways of doing it. Affirmative action in the United States didn't work. We don't need quotas. There are training opportunities. There are enhancement opportunities for underrepresented groups throughout this province, and those can be put into place. But a discriminatory policy that excludes one group or over another, doesn't matter which group it is, that doesn't reflect the New Democrats that are coming to me and saying,
and thank you very much.
Candidate. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
No, I don't agree with it. I think it should be the best person for the job, period.
All right, now we're going to turn to one of our students who is volunteering today and becoming involved in the process, and we really appreciate that. This is Alex Portik, and she has a question for the candidates.
Homelessness is a very pressing issue in today's society, and the question I bring to you all from DSAC is, what steps do you plan to take to help work towards a solution regarding the homelessness issue in the area? We are going to start with Eden.
I think that the housing issue is about more than housing the homeless. I think the housing issue applies to absolutely everybody in our community, and that's a good place to start. I think we need a full-scale public housing construction project that should start and begin with the government. We seem to be addicted to the idea that unless somebody is making money out of our needs, we aren't going to do it. We need, in Britain in 1971, 42% of the people in that country were living in social housing. It's really about providing people with housing they can afford, housing that's healthy, housing that's where they need to work, and that's what we don't have. There's a lot of people in this community who are not homeless, but they certainly need assistance, and we've got to do something about our families, our elders, and all the people that need good housing. It seems to me that at this point, people are paying too much, and many people are underhoused.
Thank you. Mr. Hauser.
Your first question to us earlier was, do you like dogs? And I think we all said yes. But as to helping the homeless, absolutely. But I'm not certain that we can go to the root of some people who say free housing as a guaranteed right for everyone. It sounds nice, but who pays? How much does it cost? That said, clearly the way the markets are working with Vancouver people coming across, cashing out, Victorians coming up, we see a huge increase in prices and rents, and people do need help. The BC Liberal government has committed $920 million this year alone for affordable housing, and if I'm successful to be elected, we'll work very hard with the municipalities to get moving on rezoning and get some land freed up to get more affordable housing built.
Thank you. Ms. Yana DiNardo.
Thank you. That's a good question. Christy Clark has failed to address the housing crisis. NDP understands the increasing supply of houses. The housing is the best way to make it affordable. We plan on building 114,000 new units over the next 10 years. CVRD, and I've worked on this, has done a lot of housing needs assessment. Local government's doing its part, and provincial government needs to step up. So also the BC NDP would like to close the loophole on speculators tax to make sure that housing's not as an investment. So I knock on doors daily, and some people that I talk to are close to being homeless with the cost of housing and food and hydro.
Thank you. Mr. Lockhart.
I would agree that affordable housing is definitely a key step to this, as well as mental health. I'm not an expert on what it takes to help somebody that's homeless, but steps definitely need to be taken as they are a valuable part of society. They are still people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. In the very short term, we have the opportunity of emergency beds and emergency access for those people that are on the street that don't want to be on the street. But the longer term, we have to engage these four groups: federal and provincial government as funders. We have to engage the building community. We have to engage local government. We have to engage the social service agencies. Federal government needs to bring the funding, the capital funding. The builders need to come with their expertise. And I had a builder tell me the other day, if they're asked to build, they can build at $137 a square foot. If the government does it, it'll be $240 a square foot. So let's bring the builders in. Local government can reduce red tape, provide the rezoning and the land in a lot of cases. And the fourth group is the social service agencies can manage the new housing stock and
Thank you,
also
Mr.
provide
Morrison.
services. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
So I think that with regards to homelessness, it is a two-part problem. The cost of housing being one, and potential mental issues with the homeless as well. I think some of the ways that we can increase some of the housing supply would be to work with the municipalities to facilitate rezoning of areas of people who may want to develop some of their properties. I think we should look at the BC building codes, potentially making it optional or at least reducing some of the regulations that are in it. And we should also be reducing or removing the regulations with regards to renting. People with basement suites who may be able to provide a room for somebody to live in, but they're told by the municipality that they can't because they don't meet certain specific standards. So we should look into that as well, reducing that red tape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And Ms. Firstenow.
Right, so to bring a solution, it's really important to understand some of the root causes. So one of the problems we have in this province is that housing has become a commodity in an out-of-control speculative market. And so people are using, for example, Vancouver real estate as tax shelters for the super rich. We have neighborhoods, tens of thousands of empty houses and then we have people who don't have anywhere to live. So the Greens have a really concrete plan. Number one, apply a 30% foreign buyers tax across BC to cool that speculative market. Make the property transfer tax progressive so that people with their houses under $1 million have their taxes go down, people in the super rich categories, their taxes go up, and increase the supply of affordable housing, investing $75 million a year and putting 4,000 new units out every year. We also need to work across all levels of government, and much like we saw in Cowichan with the Homelessness Forum, we need to have task force that makes sure everybody's working together.
Thank you, all of you.
Brought a bit of a tear to my eye there just to watch the way she jumped in at the end of the time period. That's great. All right, let's return to the microphones. Let's bounce over to number 2 this time.
Hello, my name is Karen Davies, and I'm not affiliated with any party. And with that said, it's terrifying to stand up here and ask you a question, so I can't imagine what it's like over there. My question is to all candidates. American softwood lumber tariffs are in the news, along with corresponding concerns about job losses. Can all candidates please tell us one of your accomplishments in creating sustainable forestry within the Cowichan Valley? Also, if elected, how will you promote
Let me jump in. We're going to go with one question. So we got the first one. All right? Super.
All right.
Thank you. Mr. Hauser, we're starting with you.
I believe it was how have you helped sustainable forestry in the Cowichan Valley, and I'm actually very pleased to say I've worked closely with the Cowichan Lake Community Forest Co-op to get an agreement for an extended and expanded tenure, which will mean more timber, more jobs in the Cowichan Valley. The Cowichan Valley had the first co-op, municipal or community co-op. They're an excellent, we now have 57 across the province. They give social benefits back into the community, and they provide jobs to and wood to local mills.
Is Yanni Donato.
It's me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, well, I come from a forestry family, like I had said in my intro, and we benefited greatly from that. It is a renewable resource. Christy Clark's government has ignored the job losses in forestry sector, and the NDP will revitalize BC forestry industry with doing manufacturing and secondary industry and making sure we're sending lumber instead of logs, and with logs, likely with logs, and secondary manufacturing, and wood first. So wood first housing, hospitals, and with all the infrastructure. So these are things that we would like to do and revitalize the forestry industry. Thank you.
Mr. Lockhart.
I personally don't have much experience in the forestry industry. I do live in a house that's made of wood, so I do thank them for their hard work. Apart from that, I burn wood in my house to keep me warm, so I also appreciate that. I would always support any business that's going to be putting a house over my head and all those around us. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. Great question. So forestry is a sunset industry in a lot of people's minds, but not where I live in Honeymoon Bay. It's an active, vibrant industry, and I can look to things like car light manufacturing and working to bring logs to that community. Have been directly involved, but I sat on that Cowichan Lake Community Forest Co-op until 2014 and worked with them. Secondly, more importantly, within the treaty process, Dididat First Nation and outside the treaty process with Lake Cowichan First Nation, they are becoming active and economically improved situations because of their participation in forestry. And I sit on the treaty table that's engaged in that process right now. So I feel like I'm playing an active role in that. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
So I don't specifically have any experience with the forestry industry, and I'm currently not part of the government, so I haven't done anything to facilitate the industry like you asked. But should I be involved, I would look at reducing some of the regulations surrounding the industry to help keep raw logs here and jobs here in the community.
Ms. Furstenau.
Thanks. So in Shawnigan, we have an enormous amount of forestry land. So as soon as I was elected, I reached out to the two biggest landowners, which is Timber West and Island Timberlands, and worked with them. With Island Timberlands, we actually met with the community members over on the other side of the Cowichan to try to encourage them to preserve a little bit more riparian area in a cut block they had planned. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. The community members were quite disappointed with the outcome. But recently, I've been working with Timber West because not all forestry land has to be logged. And one of the opportunities we have in Shawnigan is actually to bring tourist accommodation. And Timber West has been coming to the table and has been engaging with the Shawnigan community around finding out the appetite for bringing in tourist lodge and camping accommodation on their lands. They have 1,000 acres on the west side of Shawnigan Lake. So that's a way to build a new kind of sustainable economy on forestry lands.
Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
I was a school trustee, so I haven't had a lot of experience managing wood lots or anything like that, although I'd like to think that some of the kids who went through the schools are able to work in the forestry industry. But having said that, I think that one of the main problems we seem to be having now is that the multinationals have been plundering our trees for the best return for the least effort and cost, which is why we see raw logs leaving this valley every day by virtually hundreds and hundreds of trucks. And what I have learned is, and I certainly learned it as a school trustee, is you can't regulate the people who own and run everything. It just doesn't work. As my program says, only public ownership of our resources and the industries that spring from them can address things like the use of our forests. That way, we can all be motivated to use our wood here or leave the trees in place. It seems to me if the lumber producers in the U.S. want to profit at the expense of the builders and the people who need homes, there's nothing we can do. But we don't have to continue to make profit king here. It seems to me that we can do better.
All right, we're going to ask that the audience hold its applause for each candidate until the end of the series of questions or answers, and then we can applaud all at one time rather than, again, interfering with us getting more questions in. So just hold applause until the end of the answers that we're going to receive for each question. Microphone number 1, what have you got for us?
My question is to all the candidates.
And I'll just ask your name, please, and if you're affiliated with the party.
How would you resolve, or how would you collaborate to resolve conflicts regarding the amendments to the rezoning application in Cowichan Bay? And I'd also like to know how many members have been to the Pacific Marine and Industries and talked to the owner.
Okay. Ms. Yanni DiNardo, we're starting with you.
Yes, well, that is an application that's underway at CVRD, but I have spoken to it that we would like to be able to balance the environment with business. And that is something that I hope happens with this, and all the way through Cowichan Bay, as I worked in Cowichan Bay, and our official community plan, we have said that it is a working bay, and the community has decided that it was a working bay. So we have our fishermen, as well as our eelgrass protection, which of course helps the fish, and also with industry in there as well, that we make sure that we work together and collaborate. Thank you.
Mr. Lockhart.
I have no experience on this.
Have you spoken to
I'm sorry,
the owner?
she's answered your question. We're going to leave it at that. All right, thank you. Mr. Lockhart.
I have no experience on this and won't waste the audience time. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
No, I haven't spoken to the owner. As the chair of the committee that will be considering the application, I've been staying distant from both the owner and the opponents until we've got the information before us at committee. I don't know how that will play itself out on a provincial level, so no, I haven't. And just one quick thing, wood first, Cowichan Lake Sports Arena. We made sure wood was used in that arena renovation project. It's a jewel of the Lake Cowichan area. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
No, haven't spoke to the owner. I'm not really too familiar with any of the particulars of that. But I think that it should be something that the community is consulted with, and also the landowners.
Ms. Furstenau.
Thank you. I haven't spoken with the owner, but I did attend the Cowichan Stewardship Roundtable when the company came and made a presentation. As CVRD directors, and there's 3 of us at the table, when an application comes to us, it really is our job, 1, to keep an open mind, and 2, to get as much information as possible. And then the process itself should be collaborative. It should allow the public to be able to bring their ideas and their thoughts into it. And as this is a rezoning application, that is the process that will be followed going through this.
Ms. Haythornthwaite.
I got to be honest with you, I really don't know an awful lot about this. I like Cow Bay, seems pretty nice. But I will just say one short thing. If people are being consulted, they should be aware that sometimes being consulted is not the same as giving consent. In fact, sometimes being consulted is just a roundabout way of getting credibility for something somebody already wants to do and has decided to do. So that's all I'm going to say.
All right, quiet, please. Quiet, please. Mr. Hauser, the floor is yours.
Yes, I have met with the management of PIM. I've also met with the management of Western Stevedoring to take a look at the operation, to realize how many jobs are there. I've also spoken to the workers there. I support them staying there. I think there can be an accommodation between the environment and industry, and if there's any hint of pollution, then they should be shut down. But I think they're running a clean operation, making gangplanks for the Coast Guard, and it is good work, paying good wages. And if they were not there, that would be one heck of a drain on Cowichan Bay and the whole area of Cowichan Valley.
All right, we have a written question from the audience for all candidates, or each candidate. If elected as our MLA, how will you work to increase the income supports for unemployed, disabled people in this province to the level of a livable wage? If elected as our MLA, how will you work to increase the income supports for unemployed and disabled people in this province to the level of a livable wage? Mr. Lockhart, we start with you.
Okay, that's an excellent question. I think one of the biggest things here is instead of just increasing their wages, let's give them the tools to create their own wages. I say that respectfully because, of course, depending on what their conditions are, there's going to be things that are out of their control. But I do think because we're in a new era with the internet and other similar business ideas, there's a lot that people can do. So I think that if we increase education to allow small business owners to start up and give them the ideas that they need, they'll be able to make sustainable incomes for themselves. Thank you.
Again, we'll hold applause until the end. Mr. Morris.
Thank you. This is really such a simple thing that has to be addressed. Currently, our provincial government won't raise rates to the people that need them most. People that have disabilities, whether physical or mental disabilities. We have lowest welfare rates and absolutely atrocious rates for people on disability. So I will go to every minister, deputy minister, I will go to every statutory decision maker, every person in government to expose what a travesty it is for those people that are the weakest and most vulnerable in our community. That has to be changed. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson. Again, we'll hold applause, please.
So I think there's a distinction to be made between the 2 points you're asking about people with disabilities and also just people on welfare. I think people with disabilities obviously do need social assistance, and so that's something that we should continue funding. I think a way that we could increase the funding for that would be to start eliminating some of the bureaucratic involvement with it. Obviously, the funds need to get regulated there, but there's a whole lot of bureaucracy going on that doesn't need to be. As far as welfare, I think that for people who are able to work but are on welfare, that we should look at getting those people into jobs, and one of the ways that we could look at doing that would be to reduce the minimum hours worked in a day and also reduce the minimum wage.
Oh.
Reduce the minimum wage?
Quiet, please. Ms. First now.
Okay. So again, it's important to look at the big picture and how much poverty costs BC in extra cost. The cost to society per year is $8 to $9 billion when you take in healthcare, crime, and lost economic activity. So it's really important that we get people out of poverty. Poverty is not a productive place to be. The BC Greens have committed to doubling the welfare rates, but we've also committed to piloting a basic income project. And the basic income, what it does is instead of navigating a complex and expensive bureaucracy, basic income says people just deserve to have a living wage. And that allows people to get education, to get training, to pursue entrepreneurship, to volunteer in their communities. And the pilot projects that have been done before show that the costs associated with poverty are reduced when a basic income program is brought in. So that is what the Greens are committed to doing.
All right, guys, we'll just have to hold the applause, please, until the end of the entire set of answers. Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite, if you would.
Well, it's a tried and true socialist principle, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. And I hold with that. It seems to me that what we have to do is we have to up our game. We've been suffering under a burden of austerity for, well, really decades. And we need to expand the public services in all our communities. I notice that when private interests need assistance to prosper, they're always happy to take the advantage, and it arrives on their doorstep almost before they even think of it. We have to ensure the government steps in to provide both services, which have been seriously degraded by austerity, and the employment that springs from the public investment in our communities. This will make an enormous difference to everyone in the community. Everyone will be raised up by these things.
Mr. Hauser.
I think there will have to be an increase in rates for people with disabilities, and that will be working with groups that represent the disabled, working hard with the government to push for this because I think it makes sense, but to go further and to double the rate for welfare and to have a basic guaranteed income for all strikes me as something that we'd have to examine very carefully because, again, it's who pays, how much does it cost, how much do taxes go up to support doubling welfare rates. Welfare was never meant as a lifestyle. It's a help during difficult time. And if we can increase rates by having a strong economy, yes, let's do that.
And thank you very much. Ms. Yanni Donato.
Thank you. 1 in 5 children in BC live in poverty, 1 in 3 in Duncan. And the word poverty was not even mentioned in the Liberal budget. The NDP will bring a poverty reduction plan with legislated targets and timelines. I spoke to a lady today that had an increase to her disability. She lived in a mobile home park. She owned her own mobile home, but she has to rent. The pad rental had gone up $25. She said that she had had an increase with her disability payments of $25 this last 10 years. That is a sad state of affairs. We need to look after all of our most vulnerable people in our community. And the minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage would be one start to $15.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question?
Point of order, yes.
Yes, point of order. I think that the applause is an interaction between the audience and us. And it also provides feedback for what the audience is resonating with.
Okay, I'm simply going to defer to the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce. Sure. Applause back in. All right, here we go.
Okay, there you go. You're welcome.
So counterintuitive to that.
All right, here's a pre-prepared question to all candidates. This comes from the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. Inefficient approval processes for housing developments can add to the cost of housing. What can the provincial government do to encourage municipalities to use best practices for approval processes? Inefficient approval processes for housing developments can add to the cost of housing. What can the provincial government do to encourage municipalities to use best practices for approval processes? Mr. Morrison, we start with you.
Thank you. One of the very first things that they could do is if they were to do a complete rework of the local government charter, the Local Government Act. Thank you. The municipalities had a rework of the community charter, a modernization of it. Ours hasn't been effectively redone since 1968, I believe. Secondly, I think local government wants to remove barriers, but we also have to protect the environment through things like the riparian regulations, which, because of the provincial government, leave local governments with a toothless piece of legislation that we have no tools to punish people that have harmed the environment or damaged the environment. So there's work to be done. The provincial government must lead it because local government is a child of provincial legislation.
Mr. Anderson.
So I think that the provincial government could create a list of common standards to be referred to when people are looking to rezone, and they could also set a time limit on how long the municipalities would have to form a decision on that sort of thing, and preferably a shorter rather than longer time limit.
Ms. Fushnell.
I'm going to echo Ian a little bit. I was quite surprised once I got elected to find out that there's in a lot of ways, sorry,
Just technical difficulties? Or?
an adversarial relationship between the provincial government and local government, particularly when it comes to land use, as many of you know, with the many court cases we've had in this riding in this area. The provincial government, we need to start working far more as partners. So, and local government needs to have far more say in what's happening, because local communities have the greatest amount of wisdom, and the input should be very valued. But the other thing is that for climate strategy, the province needs to work together with the local governments to start creating far more livable and far less carbon-intensive communities. We really need to reduce our carbon emissions. 70% in the Cowichan Valley comes from greenhouse gases from vehicle and road use. So we need to collaborate in a lot of ways.
Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
I'm not exactly sure what they mean by inefficiencies. It's not something I'm very familiar with. But I always get a little suspicious when any organization that that seeks to profit from getting rid of inefficiencies asks for that, because I sometimes think what they're looking for is lowered standards. I think we have to be really careful. A lot of the regulations we have in our communities are only there because people have abused our communities, and so I'm not exactly sure what you mean by inefficiencies.
Fair enough.
Mr. Hauser.
I think what they mean are roadblocks and taking too long to get approvals done, when if you had an agenda to speed things up with great care. One thing I would do is meet with the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, George, Olivia, and others, and find out what your suggestions are, because I'm sure you have some very good ones.
Ms. Yanni DiNardo.
Yes. When developers come forward with with their proposals, I would advise them to read our official community plan. Our official community plans are designed with a vision, a 25-year vision that explains what the community wants to see with development. A lot of times I see when developers come forward, they actually have not read that, and that is a really important piece of document that needs to happen, because it is the document that the community themselves had designed. And some of us have taken 5 years to complete this document. And then it's very easy to go through the process when you follow it. So when you come to the CVRD, you make sure that your proposal is a professional proposal so that we wouldn't have to pull it apart. And also the Local Government Act does need to be updated, and a local approving officer would really benefit us for the environment and the developments. Thank you.
Mr. Lockhart.
I don't have much experience in the home building process or anything like that. What I would do is welcome advice from experts and make sure that if the advice is good, that I would get that implemented as soon as possible to help those around us. Thank you.
All right, we're going to turn to our students again. We have with us now Michelle Guattari. Michelle, if you're set, come on out with your question.
The District Student Advisory Council is wondering if you are willing to work with the youth in the community to tackle pressing issues and to include them in the process.
Can you read that again? Right up close to the mic.
The District Student Advisory Council is wondering if you are willing to work with youth in the community to tackle pressing issues and to include them in the process. And we're starting with Mr. James Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Firstino?
Thank you. Absolutely, and this is really close to my heart. And actually, as a teacher, it was really important to me that my students were engaging in authentic work and in doing projects that actually had an impact in the world. And so everything from raising money for water wells in Kenya to supporting people living in the slums in Mumbai to doing water, lakeshore and ocean shore cleanups with my students when I did project-based learning to learn about the industrial food system versus the local food system. We visited about a dozen farms in the Cowichan Valley to learn about local food. So absolutely, in fact, that would be my favorite part of the job.
Thank you. Ms. Haythornthwaite?
Okay. Nobody along here is going to say no. It's kinda nuts. As a matter of fact, and it's not on this, but it should be, is I think the voting age should be lowered to 16. I don't think that you should be held to ransom for so long. You should have a say in what we're doing. That's for sure. If I get to vote, you should get to vote, because I'm going to be off the top of the embassy real soon. So.
We have a very active BC Liberals, or BC Young Liberals wing, and you would be most welcome to join us tomorrow. I'm in Rotary, where one of our roles is to work with students through scholarships is one area, but also with Interact, where we try to get students into volunteering, and we work with them on roadside cleanup. And it's great to be involved with kids, or young adults, and we would most welcome you.
Thank you. Ms. Yana Dardo?
Yes. I've sat on I was chair of the Community Safety Advisory Commission for quite a few years, where we encouraged a youth council of the city of Duncan. So we had a great experience with them, and also encouraged them to have a seat at our commission as well. And I just came back from touring the Cole Prevost School, where they are doing a vote, and they're very fascinated about our local government and what we're doing and this election. And I find that they are really, really knowledgeable, and I would hope that there would be more of that happens in schools. So a lot of life skills need to happen. So, of course, youth should be in every aspect and should always be involved. And thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lockhart?
Youth are always our future. We always need to be supporting them, because in the end, they're the ones that are going to be supporting us. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison?
Thank you, and yes, of course, work with DSAC, and I just wanted to also mention, I think a lot of this stuff begins at home, and just my young daughter, we went over to the downtown east side, and they don't have school buses, and they don't have the ability to send teachers anymore. Well, we had one teacher, but as parents, we went and accompanied them so they could learn about gentrification of communities that are displacing people from established communities, and no wonder they're homeless. We're also talking about programs in Cowichan Lake Recreation, where disadvantaged youths can enroll in programs and have those programs covered. And just even at Cowichan Lake, the Lake Studies program, where kids in school are actually participating in Lake Studies riparian programs. So absolutely important to have our youth involved, and I'm trying to do it at home with my daughter, Rihanna.
Thank you.
All right, to all candidates, please identify, and sorry, this question written from the audience. Please identify and justify your position on the Site C Dam. Ms. Firstenow, we start with you.
Thank you. I traveled up to the Peace River last summer with my family. I met with Ken and Arlene Boone, who are losing their home if the dam proceeds. It was one of the reasons I decided to run. I am deeply opposed to the Site C dam, and the Green Party is the only party that has said we would stop it if we were elected. It doesn't make sense economically, it doesn't make sense environmentally, and it doesn't make sense for the fact that every ratepayer in BC will pay for that dam that we don't need for generations to come.
Ms. Haythornthwaite.
If I make it to the legislature, I will work with anyone to stop this thing. It is stoppable. It's stoppable now. At the current time, if it were to go forward, Wood Buffalo National Park, which is a World Heritage Site, stands to be placed in an in danger category because of damage to the Peace Athabasca Delta, which is the world's largest inland river delta. It seems to me that we do not need this power. We know we don't. If we did, the BC Hydro would not be selling power from private producers outside the province for a third of what they pay them. So we clearly do not need the power.
Mr. Hauser.
Well, I'm glad that everybody is so certain that we don't need the power. I believe we will need the power. This province is expanding. People are moving here. The population is growing. I cannot believe that we will not need that power, which is clean. And we have this province built on the visionary dreams, aspirations, and great construction of our hydroelectric dams already under Wacky Bennett that have provided good, clean power, and we will do that for the next 100 years. And there are 2,100 jobs associated with it. And I think it will make sense, and that power coming on stream in 2024 will be needed. Do we have a duck hunter out there?
Thank you, everybody. Quiet now. We're going to move forward. Ms. Yanni DiNardo.
The BC NDP would like to send this project back to the BC Utilities Commission where it should have gone in the first place. We want to have a rigorous environmental assessment to all projects, and any risk to air, land, or water will be looked at. And this project itself, and also, never mind the soils, you know, that we've talked about, Buy BC, Grow BC, and Feed BC. There is a huge swath of very arable land that could be used for food security. And 100% of this project is surplus. So it's interesting with the economic development part of it. So, thank you.
Mr. Lockhart.
We are expanding, so I do agree that in the future we will need more power. However, I do not think this is the way to do it. I know, just speaking for the farmers that are living there, if it was my home that's being threatened to have a power dam built there, I would be unhappy. Frankly, I think those people should be keeping their homes, and having that farmland is important. I do think that we need to be looking for more renewable energy sources with future technology that we have right now, such as using the ocean's power to do things like that to create more electricity. Site C would not be something that I'm interested in. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
So I guess the only people that believe that Site C is necessary are the people that believe Christy Clark's 2013 Hail Mary pass on LNG. Because really, we're reducing energy use or consumption. We've got great new alternative energy sources that are coming on stream. And what about the jobs? Because we know that they're going to talk about, we'll lose all of these jobs if we don't build Site C. There are great, high-quality, well-paying jobs and can be union jobs in the clean tech, whether it's wave, wind, and solar. We've got opportunities to meet our needs and exceed our needs with alternative energy sources. So let's do it.
Mr. Anderson.
So I do think we are going to need more electricity as we grow as a province. I haven't seen any of the numbers on it, so I don't know if this particular project is economically viable. But for me, I think this is more of a property rights issue. I don't think that the government should be expropriating anybody's property to do this. If somebody up there wants to sell their property, that's none of my business, it's none of your business. But if there are people who want to hold on to their property, I do not believe the government should be taking that from them. So if that's the case, then it would be a no.
Mr. Hauser, opportunity to rebut, as your party was mentioned in the responses.
Well, just one thing. I think clean hydroelectric power can run greenhouses to grow produce. It can also power the electric cars that we know we are coming to. I think alternate energy is coming, but there is going to be a period of transition until we're there, and windmills aren't necessarily the best solution. There's a thrum, there's a vibration, there's a noise that can drive some people batty. They may not even...
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
All right. This next question is prepared from the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. While measures have been introduced in to address the demand side of the housing market, the supply side needs greater attention. If elected, what measures would your government take to increase the supply of homes for sale and rent?
What happened with one question, one person?
Appreciate the response. We're going to follow the format we've got outlined. Thank you. Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
Well, the first thing that I guess we'd have to do as a community is determine our needs. That has to be done. There has to be a survey and set our goals based on providing every family and every person who needs housing with comfortable, healthy, affordable, just affordable, not free, safe housing. I would see working with local governments and our school board, by the way, to introduce planning for the use of land that's already zoned for public use in the service of a provincial and federal public housing project. And this is aimed not just at the homeless, but for all working people. Pressure for this could be brought through the UBCM, unions, community organizations. It seems to me we can have a full program of land planning and efficient building program that will not burden our community with financial load, as pricing for materials can be carefully controlled if you're doing things through the public realm. Housing ought to be dealt with in relation to good town planning with pleasant surroundings and efficient utility services. This is probably one of the number one things we have to deal with.
And thank you very much. Mr. Hauser.
Sorry to that fellow up there, but your interruption, I'm going to have to ask you to ask the question again.
While measures have been introduced in to address the demand side of the housing market, the supply side needs greater attention. If elected, what measures would your government take to increase the supply of homes for sale and rent?
I think it was discussed earlier, you have to work very closely with the municipal governments to get the zoning freed up and to move along more quickly to have the land available to develop into good housing, whether it's affordable housing or all housing that is necessary. And that could be apartments, it can be condos, it could be any number of things, but I think we have to move more smartly in getting the zoning done so it is allowed to happen quickly.
Ms. Yanni Bernardo.
Yes, I'd said in the past that previously that the NDP would be building 114,000 more housing units in BC, and also be encouraging the co-op housing and different rental housing as well. And I know that in the official community plan of Cowichan Bay, they've now as well made that there's more rentals available, and we have more rentals in different homes. That is actually better for everyone, because you'll be able to have, if we have a higher amount of rentals, then it would be cheaper and there'd be more available. So we have now put that in our bylaws, that you can have secondary suites, carriage homes, and rental units.
Mr. Lockhart.
Rezoning is definitely going to help, but I think instead of worrying about these smaller issues, I think we should be turning to our banks. I mean, when I think a couple of percent, I think no big deal. However, over 25 years, it turns out you're almost doubling your mortgage payments, or sorry, the total cost. I think that our banks need to be stepping up to the plate to be providing more affordable housing costs to us, as my generation can probably never afford a house at this stage. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. There's a number of solutions that local government, yes, they can help with, micro homes and the likes, and yes, there can be some possibilities there, but the fact of the matter is that the last affordable housing that was built, or the last housing that average people could get into, was funded by the federal and provincial governments 30 years ago. They're going to have to come to the table with the grant funding, and as I outlined earlier, grant funding from the senior governments, local government can play its role with zoning and land. We need to engage the builders to come and build quality stock for this region. And lastly, bring in the agencies, the social service agencies, and groups like co-ops to help to manage this. There is an answer to this. We got to bring the people together and collaborate.
All right, before we complete the question, we're going to take a brief pause for a water refill here.
Thank you.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
Stay hydrated.
Yes, you do. Madam.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Anderson?
So I think that, similar to one of the questions that was previously asked, I think we need to start reducing some of the red tape associated with, people's private property. If somebody owns a home and they want to build a carriage house in the back to be able to rent out, or they want to rent out their basement suite or even a room, I think that that's something they should be able to do. It's their property. I don't believe that the government should be dictating to people what they can do with their private property. And also reducing some of the regulations associated with building. If we made it easier for companies to be building new homes and for people to be building multiple homes on their properties, if they so wish, then that would certainly increase the supply of new homes for sale and rentals available.
Ms. Firstnow.
Thanks. Earlier I talked about the root causes, and I think when we look at housing affordability, we also have to consider how it impacts other parts of our society. We had a plumber over yesterday. We were getting our new well plumbed in. Next time I'll call you, James.
Yep, thanks.
And he said he can't find people to train and to be apprentices because the young people are leaving BC because they can't afford to live here. So we lose our best and our brightest when we don't have affordable housing. Again, the Greens are committed to a $750 million per year to invest in affordable housing, to create 4,000 units a year. And I agree with Ian, we really do need to be collaborating at all levels of government. We need to be coordinating the efforts between the groups that are doing such amazing work right here in the Cowichan Valley. And once we're all working together, we can solve this problem, and I think we can solve it very quickly.
And thank you. A written question from the audience, and we're probably down to the last question, maybe one more after this, just depending on how quickly we're able to get through it. But just if you're at the microphones, at best we're going to have time for just one more after this, and even then it's going to be tight. So the question is, what revenue sources will be increased to pay for your promises of increasing education spending? What revenue sources will be increased to pay for your promises of increasing education spending? Mr. Hauser, we start with you.
The BC Liberal government has already spent in the past year a record on education, $5.9 billion.
Quiet, please.
$5.9 billion. And you may not be happy with that, but we have an excellent education system. And in the Cowichan Valley, enrollment has gone down, per student funding has gone up, and our results are good. So yes, we can do better in education, we can do better in health, and we can do better for seniors, but we have to have an economy that is working well to provide the tax base to do that.
Ms. Yanni Donato.
Yeah, well, I would just like to say that the Christy Clark government has caused 16 years of instability in classrooms, and the NDP doesn't need a Supreme Court to tell us how to fund our education. And we have a 140-page platform, and we will not be raising taxes from the Liberals' budget. We have it all costed out right here. So if anybody wants to see it, it's right here.
Mr. Lockhart.
The Liberals have devalued the education system for my generation all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. I think the biggest step here is getting parents involved with the schooling. We need to have the system change so that more people support it. We need to have children going back to the public school system instead of parents not supporting what's happening and taking their kids out of it. I don't think increasing the taxes is going to help us. We just need more support from all of us to change the problems that are occurring right now. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
I think I heard the question is where would we raise the revenue to pay for some of these promises? And I think there's some really simple ways that we can start to do this. Anybody heard of a company called Nestle? Aren't we giving them our water, our natural resources at a tiny, tiny price? Why don't we start to charge some of the corporate welfare friends of our current government the real cost of what our natural resources are, so that we've got some funds in general revenue and to pay for a lot of these programs we want. And I think we should also be looking at programs like bringing in some of these quasi-crown corporations back to within government so that we can reap the benefits of a lot of the work that's being done out there. So those are two areas. Let's start charging people for what they're taking from this province, and let's get some crown corporations back under control of the government, which is you.
Mr. Anderson.
So in the budget that was just released, as I was reading through it, I was, maybe thought I was reading it incorrectly. There is as much money allocated for government administration of funds as there is for the actual schools. So I think there could certainly be some money drawn from that, if not all of that money. The Libertarians, we'd like to look at the idea of charter schools, giving the funds directly to parents so that they can then decide which schools they would like to send their children to. Charter schools put control back in the hands of the parents and the teachers rather than government bureaucrats. And it also helps pioneer progressive teaching methods that help improve educational outcomes.
Ms. Furstenau.
Yeah, the Greens have made a huge commitment to education funding, above the $330 million that was ordered by the Supreme Court, an additional $220 million in 2017-18, and then rising to $1.46 billion by 2021. Education really is the backbone of our economy. We need to have highly educated, skilled people. We have an innovative economy coming at us, and if we don't get out in front of it, we're going to really suffer. Fair taxation. The taxation under the Liberals has actually disproportionately helped the richest 10% in this province. Their incomes have spiked and their tax burden has gone down. Meanwhile, middle and lower income earners have seen regressive taxes go up, ICBC, hydro, MSP, ferries. So we have a tax reform plan that makes taxation fair and doesn't put the burden on the people that can least afford it. Finally, we can look at proper management and spending. We're talking about subsidizing an LNG plant to the tune of $440,000
Thank you very much.
per worker.
Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
Well, I know where we can find almost $500 million just like that, and that's where we can find it with funding to the private schools in this province. That's how much they're getting, and their funding is increased, but 3 times the rate that it's increased to the public system. So that's one place. That would be nice. We need to overhaul our tax code, get rid of the tax credits and incentives that are given to the wealthiest people in our province. Public ownership of our resources and the industries that spring from them would allow us to not only protect our environment, but we'd be able to enjoy the material benefits that all those things bring that are now soaked up in profits to a tiny number of shareholders. Full employment will raise the revenue that the government is able to collect. Fully funded public services not only provide the services we need, but raises the employment levels in all our communities. People who work pay taxes. That's all.
Mr. Hauser, opportunity to rebut.
Thank you, and I asked for the rebuttal because my colleague Laurie had just mentioned instability in the education system, and I think that's quite wrong. We have just had a 6-year agreement, the first and longest teacher-government agreement, and so things are not unstable. They are going along well, and the government has the $320 million available for what the court has said should be put into the class size and composition.
Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite, opportunity to rebut.
I'm sorry. When you have to be dragged through the courts for 15 years at a cost of millions of dollars, I like this, Steve. I really do. When you have to be dragged through the courts for 15 years, and let's not forget that's a whole cohort of students, then that shows intent as far as, and as for our schools being great, they are great. When I go into the classrooms, they're excellent, but you know why they're great? Not because of you guys, Steve. It's because of the people who work in them.
And thank you very much. All right, we are tight for time, but I'd like to make use of every minute, so we're going to squeeze in one more question before we move to closing remarks. Microphone number 2.
I'm not affiliated with any party. My name is Bill Savage. I'm a resident of Shawnigan Lake. My question is for the Green Party candidate.
Again?
Quiet, please.
You've made a number of statements. The question is, what actually are you going to do for small business? You are pushing to get a small sawmill closed down in Shawnigan Lake. I myself am a local member.
Sir. We've got your question. What are you going to do for small business? Is that correct?
What are you going to do regarding the small mill shutdown in Shawnigan Lake regarding jobs?
Thank you. Ms. Firstenau?
So the sawmill that Mr. Savage is referring to is a sawmill that applied for a rezoning application and went through the process at the CVRD. There was a public meeting, and based on the input from the community and based on the fact that the sawmill is on residential land, not zoned for industrial use, and it's operating as an industrial sawmill, the CVRD board rejected that rezoning application. If you live on residential property, you expect to have certainty about the properties next to you. That's what local government does with land use, is protect the rights of citizens to know and to have certainty about the land that they live on. Mr. Savage, I've asked you, I phoned you actually about 2 years ago,
that is
and
not
you,
true.
Mr. Savage,
you told me not to phone you again. You can come and speak to me anytime.
That is not true. None of what you said is true.
And thank you to everyone. That concludes our questions. We're now going to move into closing remarks. I'll give the candidates a moment just to gather their thoughts. Just a reminder, Mr. Lockhart, you are first up.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Once again, my name is Samuel Lockhart. As you can tell, I'm not a seasoned politician. When I think politician, I think corruption, bribery, and ultimately somebody who's not standing up for your needs. My intention is to never be a politician. What I want to do is be somebody here to advocate for your needs. I'm willing to stand up here. It's not easy. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. However, I'm stepping up to the plate to do something that other people won't. What I want to see is more people in my younger generation, voting. I think that it's terrible that people aren't standing up. I think that it's sad that the youth have lost faith in our government system, and I think we need to change this around. The old things aren't working. It's time for something new. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. And I happen to agree. Youth have to be involved because it is their future. And First Nations elders tell us to look 7 generations ahead so that our youth could have a good life. And so today, in closing, people have put forward their party platforms. They've talked about what the parties are going to do. I think 140,000 homes the NDP is going to build for us. Well, I don't know. But I'm hearing tonight, Aaron talk about discrimination. I've heard Alex talk about affordable housing solutions, and that's a concern. Forestry concerns. What about working with youth? And of course, the Site C Dam is a really big issue. So I'm talking with community members on the doorstep and listening at events like this because I think you want an MLA that's going to go to Victoria and work on your behalf on your issues, not putting party platforms first. So I stand here before you saying, let's put the Cowichan Valley first. Let's put people before political parties. Let's put Cowichan Valley first. Let's vote Ian Morrison on May the 9th. Thank you very much.
Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
Is it you?
Yep, Ms. Haythorne-Thwaite.
Beg your pardon. Sorry, I was just thinking. Anyway, oh dear, gotta stop doing that. Thank you for listening to us. It's great. And I know many of, maybe not all of you, may feel that an independent MLA will not be able to successfully represent this riding. How could anyone, even someone as mouthy and obnoxious as I am, possibly make a good MLA all by themselves? And I understand, however, you have for a very long time had an MLA from one party or another go on to Victoria to stand up for your interests. My question is simple. How's that working out for you? During elections, the air rings with guarantees, and a lot of it sounds sadly familiar. In fact, a lot of it was promised last time and the time before that. How many times have you sent someone forward to represent your community only to find the years pass and much of what was promised has simply evaporated without a whimper? After all, they get there, they check the books, they exclaim in horror that they had not expected things to look so bad. They really did intend to carry out the platform items they ran on, but reality has intervened, and as it happens, we must be grown up and endure, or wait forever, whichever comes first. So, I would be there without the backup of a party, but if I was there, I would have something better. I would be free to speak as I wish and work with anyone who would work with me. I would be there with the clear view that the program I proposed would be a project for every one of us. If I am there, then you will be there, and no excuses will be good enough for any of us. So, in that spirit, I'm asking you to send an independent socialist to the legislature. Thank you.
Ms. Firstenow.
Thank you for coming. When you elect an MLA, you are electing a person to be your advocate and your champion. That is what I have done in Shawnigan. I have been a champion for my community, as I will be a champion for all of Cowichan Valley. I have a master's degree, a teaching degree, and nearly 20 years of grassroots advocacy experience. Standing up for people and for future generations is what I've devoted much of my adult life to, whether it's been as a volunteer or a board member of a nonprofit organization, as social justice chair for the Victoria Teachers Association, or as the leader of the Save Shawnigan Water Community Action Group. In Shawnigan, we made history. As a planet, we have just made a different kind of history. The level of CO2 in the atmosphere has reached 410 parts per million, a level it has not been at in millions of years. And yet, you're hearing very little about climate change in this election. We could be a renewable energy-driven economic and environmental powerhouse, but we're not, because we don't have the political will to make the transition off of fossil fuels. And yet we know that $1 million invested in renewable energy produces 15 jobs compared to the 2 jobs in the fossil fuel industry. The Greens have a plan to move us into a climate leadership position, a plan to ensure that the economy serves the people of this province and not the other way around, and a plan to create income security so that everyone can thrive. And here in Cowichan Valley, we can make history by electing a Green candidate, a candidate whose campaign has been funded entirely by people who are inspired by the Green vision and not by big money donors who will expect to have a say in decisions made in this province. Electing a Green, you will create the possibility of a minority government. Do not be scared. Do not be angry. Vote with hope. Vote with optimism. Vote for what you truly want. Vote BC Green.
Ms. Yanni DiNardo. Quiet, please.
Thank you. More than half British Columbians are living paycheck to paycheck. We don't need 4 more years of Christy Clark. Government is about choices, and Christy Clark is making the wrong ones. I want to represent you in Victoria as part of a responsible government. Voting for a BC NDP government will provide the opportunity for a better services to make life more affordable and provide good jobs and sustainable economy. We need a better BC. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
Mr. Anderson.
So in a free society, we should be able to choose which individuals and organizations we associate with and be free to decide what we spend our money on. But currently, we're forced to contribute our taxes to be redistributed as the ruling party sees fit. It's my opinion that the primary role of our government should be to protect citizens from force and fraud. But today, a minority of British Columbians have their will enforced by the government. Tax dollars are wasted pursuing and persecuting perpetrators of victimless crimes and creating inefficient government monopolies. We have no choice but to insure our vehicles with ICBC. If we want to have an alcoholic beverage, we have no choice but to buy it from a government-approved source after a huge markup. We have no choice but to wait as healthcare is rationed to us rather than allow private care providers to complement the existing system. And we have no choice but to educate our children within the framework dictated to us. We budget to live within our means to support a government that continues to live beyond theirs. The best way for us in BC to start reducing the size of our government is going to be to start eliminating Crown Corporation monopolies like ICBC. Now, there have been some tax cuts in the latest budget, but taxes, in my opinion, are still way too high, and the funds collected are not being used efficiently. We need to get common sense back into our government. I don't know what's best for you, and neither do any of the other parties. Only you know what's best for you, and that's what the Libertarian wants to offer you. So if you want lower taxes, less government, and more personal freedom, please vote James Anderson in the next election. Thank you.
Mr. Hauser.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming tonight. This is a big night for everyone. All sorts of decisions to be made, differing platforms, differing personalities. I would ask you to please consider voting for Steve Hauser of the BC Liberals to be your representative. I believe I'm fair-minded, curious, and will work hard for you and stick up for the Cowichan Valley and do a good job of representing the interests of the people of Cowichan Valley. And when elected, any one of us has to represent all the interests, not just Liberal voters, but to look after the interests of everyone in the Cowichan Valley. And as I said at the beginning, my real thrust is a hospital, hospice, high school, and more affordable housing. Please consider on May 9th and even earlier when you can vote in the advance polls, Steve Hauser, BC Liberal, Cowichan Valley. And if anybody has questions afterwards, I'm sure many of us will be around. I'll be happy to talk to any of you if you have questions. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, your candidates for the upcoming provincial election on May the 9th. Thank you, the audience, for coming out tonight, and to our volunteers. And if I can just slide in quickly, I just wanted to say thank you to the youth that came out. It's so great to see them involved in processes like this. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, and of course the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce. Please be sure to vote in the upcoming election and have a safe drive home. Good night.